start recording this nonsense. So it is just us today, unless somebody pops up. Probably not, because 11 points of extra credit.
That's a lot.
It's a third of what you can get, so. But you need to go then. So let's just talk about the lecture, what you remember from it, and then we'll go on to the direct democracy study guide.
Okay. So I have my notes here. Oh, so like Thursday we talked about like immigration and the priorities.
Yeah, and it was like that political cartoon where it was just like, wasn't it like a newspaper, and it was just like, Trump plans to enforce the law, and then like the editor's like, no, we can't publish that.
Yeah, like.
And that was to say that people were being sensitive about Trump enforcing immigration law, but that could be argued because, I mean, really, it's more so that he's doing the extremist immigration law.
Yeah.
To just following the letter of the law.
So we're just saying how, like kind of some of the things, and then like.
Hey. Sorry, it took me a while to join. I was surfing through my email to try to find the code to log in.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, no, Andrea and I were like, okay, I guess we're going to be the only ones today. I guess everybody's at the extra credit event. I was like, okay, I'll wait till like 6:05. And then I should have just waited like 3 minutes. So right now we're going over last Thursday's lecture, and then we're going to go to Tuesday, and then we're going to do the direct democracy study guide.
Okay.
So I'll let you get out your notes and everything, and then, because we were just talking about the political cartoon that they showed, where it was like about Trump enforcing immigration law.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Andrea, you were looking in your notes, and what did we continue to discuss after that?
We talked about freedom of speech.
Because that was the person's insight and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so, what were like the types, like, is all speech protected in America, or no? Okay. What isn't protected?
Slander. Oh, my bad, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, you keep going, that's fine.
Like slander, I forgot the one, it's like the written version of slander, I forgot the exact name. Libel, yeah.
Yeah. There's another one that's kind of big.
Is hate speech different from the one he said, or is it the same thing?
No, it's different.
Oh, okay.
So, it's interesting because hate speech is kind of protected, but mostly not.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's okay as long as it doesn't directly threat the physical safety of another person or incite violence towards people. If it incites violence in any way, then that is illegal hate speech, because you're trying to it's like fighting words, when you threaten somebody, except for it's toward a larger audience.
Was that the third type that you were talking about, or was there another type?
Yeah, that was what I wanted to get to. Yeah. So, and then there was like another one where it was like, well, there's like student speech, but that's something you don't really need to know about. That's just basically like.
Is there a type of speech that's like you can't talk about the government, like secrets, or is that covered in slander?
No, so that is. So I know there's there is a term for it. Because you can't talk about something that threatens the national security because that's technically treason. That's what technically what Edward Snowden did by releasing protected documents. Then that's why he was considered treasonous. So language that threatens the safety of the security of the national government or state government, that is considered illegal because it threatens the safety of other citizens. Basically, if it threatens the safety of other people in any way, it's probably not allowed to say it. Unless you mean it in a joking manner or something, like comedians. Of course, so, yeah. Basically, I want to kill you. That's bad. Just don't hurt people. Simple thing, but you know what? So many people violate it. Oh, okay. I could go on to this, but I need to stop myself.
But just one more thing. I wouldn't because it's like slander, but don't politicians do that all the time, or is it just not considered slander?
So, well, let's see what the direct definition of slander is.
Okay.
Because that might give us a better idea. Because I know it's mostly damaging to. Okay, so oral defamation, in which someone tells one or more persons an untruth about another, which untruth will harm the reputation of the person displayed. Let's see, slander of public figures.
Don't
I think that's something because I think that's a little different because they're public figures. And so, as it says here, a public figure cannot base a lawsuit on incorrect, harmful statements unless there is a proof that the writer or publisher acted with actual malice, knowledge of falsity, or reckless disregard of the truth. So, and that's why a lot of people can get away with, even if they do say something with malice, they can be like, "Oh no, I thought it was true. It's an alternative fact."
Okay, I see.
Yeah. So that's allowed.
Is it allowed because it's a little bit less, it's less, it's more difficult to prove?
That, and if we started charging people who said bad things about politicians and public figures, then that would be a serious infringement upon free speech because we're supposed to be able to criticize them.
Oh, okay.
That's kind of a democracy, is that we're able to criticize our leaders so that they better represent ourselves, and we can be, and that's what leads to, recalls and everything. And if we couldn't openly criticize them, then that would be a serious infringement.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because, let's say, in Russia, you can't say bad things about Putin, or else the KGB will get you.
Wow.
And that's the truth in many, dictatorships. And so, that's kind of one that is an American safeguard against, the tyranny of monarchs and dictators. So yeah. And then what types what types of speech are protected?
So, I mean, wouldn't we just classify that as any speech that doesn't violate the three that we just talked about, or?
Essentially, but like political speech has some extra protection and stuff for it.
Oh.
Because it is something that could be violated. And like student speech as well is protected because so like statements about the actions of the government that you need to be able to people need to be able to speak out against the government and criticize these things. Same with the politicians. Does that make a bit more sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's actually student speech is one that I recently just learned, which is why I keep saying it and stuff like that. Because I'm like, oh, this is something new, and I'm like, huh, okay. But because it was in somebody's insight and like it hadn't really been addressed, it was more so one that I was kind of like, oh, okay. That was.
But isn't it kind of weird how, like, so we're all citizens, so we all have the right of freedom of speech, but yet they're putting students in a specific category.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I thought weird because I looked it up like a while ago and it said that it was like that you have the freedom of speech in school because you can wear like the young fingers and stuff like that, but now I can't find it. And so now I'm very confused and I'm like, what? Did I imagine this? I mean, I knew I was grading papers like late, but shit. So now I'm kind of just like, okay, let's see. This is why I am just a TA. I do not know everything. But can you repeat your question again? Because I think I was a little too distracted with the student speech.
Oh, so like, okay, so everybody has the right to freedom of speech under the Constitution, right, and the Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
So why is there a specific category for students? Like, isn't that already implied? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And so, I think for this one, it was that students can say radically critical things of the government because they're students, and that they need to be able to have this free flow of thought. I just like hear somebody laughing in the background of Joseph.
I'm sorry.
Like, no, it's okay. I'm like, do they hear me or something? Like, getting all self-conscious and shit.
I can mute this for a while because I have a lot of background noise. A lot of people.
No, you're good. You're good. I was just like, do I have more than like 2 people as an audience? But okay, so student speech, because students are the young thinkers and they're going to be thinking through different types of thoughts, and some things will be a bit more radical, and so they should be allowed to go through these thoughts and not be considered as treasonous. because they're still learning and formulating.
Okay.
So let me see. I just like saw this. Okay. Do not. So. Okay. Actually, this is more so that if you're in a public school, you still retain the right of freedom of speech. Like your teacher cannot say, okay, in my classroom, you can't say these things, but you can because you're still in America. You still have freedom of speech, even though you're under the authority of your teacher, who is a public servant because they're working in a public school.
If that's the case, could students just backlash on the teachers and stuff? I mean, it just seems like that's a little bit too much protection, if that makes sense. I mean, what's to stop them from talking back to the teacher and saying that it's my freedom of speech to do this?
And that is okay. In the school context, the United States Supreme Court has identified three major relevant considerations: the extent to which students' speech in question poses a substantial threat to disruption, whether the speech is offensive to the prevailing community standards, and whether speech, if allowed as part of a school activity or function, would be contrary to the basic educational mission of the school. And so each of these considerations has given rise to a separate mode of analysis and implied that any one of these may serve as an independent basis for restricting student speech.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so if it's disruptive or extremely offensive or impairing the education mission, like how there's always that rule of don't disrupt the class because you're impairing the education of others by doing so, and so that kind of falls with that. So kind of protected, but not protected, but not quite.
That makes sense. They covered their bases.
Yeah. It's just like, yeah, but little asterisk. But that's kind of needed with humans and stuff like that because we have so many variables that we can't just have oh yes, you have the freedom of speech. Because that is way too broad. Because it can be harmful when it incites violence and shit, or disrupts your education. So yeah, speech. And then we kind of talked about Milo Yiannopoulos, that crazy guy.
Oh yeah, the one who something about, is it child molestation or something like that?
So he is pro pedophilia?
Yeah, that.
Yeah. And that was recently found in an older interview with him. And then so he lost his book deal and he was gonna speak at the Conservative Political Action Committee conference. And then because of this, even the Republicans were like, yeah, we can't have a child molester. The other stuff, the misogynist stuff, that's fine. But we gotta draw the line at child molester. I mean, I'm glad that they do have some decency as far as some aggression. But I'm like, okay, so this guy, it took you this long? And he's also, he's gay, but he's also fairly homophobic.
What?
But see, he's one of those people that so the reason why he's pro pedophilia is he was yeah, like my Catholic priest touched me and stuff like that, and like, yeah, and he was like, that was a good experience, and like, yeah, no. And like he's like, relations between, 14-year-old boys and 30-year-old men, that's fine. It was boys being boys.
What?
Know?
That's
And
crazy.
and see, and it's people like that that make gay people look bad because they're like, oh, they're pedophiles. It's like, no, that guy's a pedophile and he happens to be gay.
It's crazy. So this came out recently, but that was an interview from a while ago.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I saw it. I recently, because like after this, I was like, okay, I'll finally watch like an actual interview with him. Like I watched it with Bill Maher. Dude was crazy. He's just, and he like loves Trump, and it's weird, and like, it's like you're Catholic and you're gay and you love Trump, and it's just like so many
Like all these
conflicting identities. I'm like, no wonder there's so much hate.
It's crazy.
We should probably move on because 6:30, almost 6:30. We're still talking about speech on Thursday. But okay, so we talked about that, and then on Tuesday we talked about military spending.
Mm-hmm.
What was kind of the big point? What's going on with military spending in America?
So we're already spending a lot of money on military, and Trump wants to increase it even more now. And then in comparison to other countries, in the world, we're like the number one that spends the most money on military. And something that I found interesting was that it's like a substantial amount of difference between the US and the other countries who also spend a lot of money.
Yeah, China was second and spent 21 billion, and we spend, what was it, 594 or something like that?
Yeah.
More than twice the size. And he wants to increase it. Thus, what happens when we increase military spending?
Other things have to be cut for the budget to balance out.
And a lot of that budget's going to be going to that wall that is going to work so well. Because, we're in ancient times, and like China, we needed a great wall. And that works, with drones and people digging.
That's a good point. It was only so smart back then because they didn't have the technology to combat the wall.
It's just, yeah. It's funny because like a while ago, like when it first was proposed, like the professor showed like this political cartoon that was like the Wall of Jericho and stuff like that. And it was just like, yeah, no, this isn't gonna work. This is a very ancient tactic, and no, they're gonna fly over. Just fuck off.
That's our president.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beginning of the long 4 years. This is why we must be strong and stand together.
Yeah.
At least that's what I keep telling myself until I get that student visa to get out of here. Okay. And so we talked about military spending, and then after that we talked about the change between culture and polity. Either of you remember what polity is?
I mean, I remember you were going to write it on the board, but the markers weren't working. So I didn't get to catch it. I was going to ask you about it too.
Well, okay, that's good. And so polity is essentially law. what is put into the legal framework of the government, whether it be state or national. And so oftentimes we see that, and so just think of when also legislation is another way you can write polity. And so that's what the legislative branch does, the House and the Senate. And so this was actually one of the big questions of the Ginsburg questions was, why is it that we see civil action, civil rights happen through the federal court system rather than the legislature? And remember we talked about it was because culture often changes before polity does.
Mm-hmm.
And do you guys remember like an example of that? We went over a couple.
Brown versus Board, could that be an example?
Yeah.
Because in the Plessy versus Ferguson, it was pretty much popular belief that there should be school segregation, and it's pretty popular. That's why it was established for so many years. And then it was finally struck down in Brown versus Board because people started to get different opinions on school segregation.
Yeah, exactly. Because people started realizing, oh, you know what? These people with another different skin tone, they're equal human beings. What a concept. They deserve equal treatment. And you know what? The schools that they're supposedly getting equal treatment in are actually pretty shitty. So, hey, we should change this. Oh shit, it's in our law. Okay, I guess we have to bring this to the federal courts to actually change it.
Isn't there some situations as well where the law changes before the culture does?
Yes, and that happened, you can say, with gay marriage, because it still isn't accepted nationwide. There is still a significant amount of people that don't believe in it, or even in gay rights, but there is enough people that it did shift. And honestly, it's probably because of cases like Lawrence v. Texas that we had the federal courts strike down Prop 8 and legalize marriage throughout the nation. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And so, all right, okay, 35. So, that's pretty much the sum of what we talked about on Tuesday. Was there anything that we didn't go over that you guys wanted to address? I also need to say you all instead of you guys. That's an annoying little thing that I have.
So the word was polity, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Polity.
Thank you.
I have one final question, and this is just I'm just curious. So we're talking about civil rights in like the legal system and stuff, but I just feel like there's civil rights. So why would they be involved in government? Like, you know, like sexual preference, I think that's something that's very personal. So why would the government say like, oh, you can't do that, when it's like, do you get what I'm trying to say? I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah. So it's more about equality under the law.
So
it's about treating people equally so that they can all be citizens and participate in electoral process, civil society, as equally as anybody else.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like used in a way to even the playing field, if you could say?
Yeah. And like ensuring that people are, it's more so that it's kind of taking away like disadvantages that people are given because of one of their identities. Because as you know, people have layered identities. We're not just one thing. And so that's why it's a part of civil rights. Because, yeah, does that make sense? Or am I going in a circle?
No, yeah, it makes sense.
Okay.
It does.
All right. So that's why. And actually that is that judicial decision was considered a part of judicial activism. And that's when judges, change the law because of what they think is right or / what fits what is socially acceptable. Whatchamacallit, other judges who have a strict interpretation of the Constitution, they didn't agree with the Lawrence v. Texas decision because it wasn't strictly written into the Constitution. But the activist judges see that, okay, the founding fathers aren't going to include everything because humans have so many variables, and they're not going to know. I mean, they weren't thinking about gay people back then. And so the Constitution needs to be a living document. It needs to adapt to society as it grows. And so that's where you see this kind of difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Also, I wanted to just throw that in there because you said that the government shouldn't interfere with preferences. You said something like that.
Andrea?
Oh, yeah.
I think there's some cases where they probably should intervene, especially like when we're talking about like pedophilia. They probably should intervene and make laws because that's a sexual preference.
Yeah. And so, they can't, but they cannot make laws against sexual preferences that do not harm anyone in the process.
That's very true.
Like, we can have plenty of laws against pedophilia and necrophilia, and non-consent. That we can regulate. But when there's consenting adults, then that's a little more gray. And as long as it's not, infringing upon another person, where it's like, hey, I did not consent to be a part of this. Like, that's why, like, public sex is illegal, because, out of public, the crowd did not consent to see this. We're like, oh, okay. I did not, like, check off, but I'm like, okay, yes, I'm good with seeing this. And that's why, like, you'll have, like, sex clubs and stuff like that, where people have consented to go see that.
Oh, gosh.
So, yeah, that sexual preference is another one that's regulated.
I see the need now.
Yeah. Man, people missed out today.
Seriously.
We'll just have to watch it. Okay, and so let's go on to indirect democracy. I'm sorry, of course, the question that he asked was about the friggin' progressives, the one thing we didn't cover on Monday.
I was like,
I was just like, please write about the initiatives, about like referendum, like please guys. I hope you read after.
I was running. I was like the progressives. It was hard for me to remember what I was like. Wait, what?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I hate it when that happens because there's just so much, and I'm just like, of course, the one thing, you bastard! Now you made me be a bad SI leader. I don't see what the questions are. I just grade them on Thursdays. Okay, but so the progressives were the people in California who got the initiative and the referendum and the recall process into the California Constitution. And so they were. Were you gonna say something?
Oh, I completely failed that.
Me too.
I couldn't remember what they were. I think there was something about like women's right or something.
Oh, okay. I was like, that's I figured. So, like, if like people are gonna like, or like just like super liberal or whatever.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I'm taking California government, so we talked about that already.
Oh,
and I
yeah.
completely forgot.
Gotcha. You know, now that I know that you're doing California government, I might pick on you a little bit for that.
Oh, God.
Just a little bit, because I'm not as familiar with it, because, like, I know as far as this class goes, but, like, as I was telling Andrea earlier, I'm international relations, not domestic politics as much. So, but I still have, it's like, I know more of the national government than I know, like, the state government stuff. But yeah, so progressives were I'm just like I feel so bad, but you know what, you guys are doing good on your other quizzes, and that's why this is an average. It's gonna be okay. Yes, meow.
I really got confused on that because you talk about progressive. I was like, progressive in politics? I was like, wait. It was
So they were the ones who were trying to, they were jobless, right? And they were against Chinese immigration. And then they wanted to stop the octopus. So like they wanted to stop the railroad from having its tentacles all over like the government system.
Yeah, and that was like the biggest thing, was that they were like fighting against the railroad monopolies and everything. And this was like in the 1800s. And then like, so that happened, and then but as you guys probably read in I think it's R3, and they talked about what you call it, like initiatives in California with like Jerry Brown and like Proposition 13.
Yeah.
And so and how it kind of created the opportunity for factions to be bigger and stuff like that, and like it really wasn't implemented that much until that point, because it was more of, as we were saying, it was more of a safety measure against like these tyrannical interests. But now it is kind of shifted to actually help those like factions that may harm others for the betterment of themselves. Because that's going to be what Madison is talking about more in Federalist 10. I know I'm kind of like skipping through things because I realize that we're running out of time. And so if I get kind of confusing, let me know and I'll stop and clarify. And so that was kind of the progressives, and that's what they instituted. It looks like I think some people actually started writing in on some of the study guide. And so, but you know what, I want to go down to Federalist 10 because I think it's the more important reading and stuff, because the professor's going to talk about it. And so the title of it is "The Same Subject Continued, the Union as a Safeguard Against Domestic Faction and Insurrection." And so we're remember when Madison was talking about the Union as a safeguard earlier? In what context was he like saying that it's a safeguard? Like, how does it safeguard?
Was it like the checks and balances thing?
Yeah, exactly. And so this is going to continue on to talk about how the checks and balances are also protection against like domestic factions. And so Amber actually kind of wrote in here, and I think she was probably working with Jordan. They defined factions as a group of people who gather together to protect or promote their special economic interests and or political opinions. So basically, a faction is any sort of special interest group. Like, I'm trying to think of things like retired persons, you know, like AARP. They would be considered technically a faction. Even our parties are considered factions. Anime club could be considered a faction.
So what were the factions that Madison was most concerned about? Were there like any?
So he was more concerned about like factions within kind of job classes. You know, like especially with you know how different the economies were in the North and the South back in the 1700s, where the North was more industrialized and became more industrialized as time went on, while the South was more about agriculture and farming and, you know, owning slaves because that was their thing, because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to do anything. And so these factions, and even there were factions between like the city folk and the people who are in rural areas as well. And so there are just lots of competing interests. And he was worried that if they're able to gain enough power, then they can use their power and influence to put themselves at a better place and put the others and make them disadvantaged. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Okay, cool. And so even though they're supposed to be even though they kind of protect against each other by being those foxes in the hen house, as we talked about before, they frequently work against public interest because they're very selfish in what they want. They don't care about what is best for the nation as a whole. It's what is best for their faction, their group. And so, and he talks about, and he says why he thinks that pure democracy, direct democracy, voting directly, not through a representative, is not a good way to control the effects of faction. And why does he prefer the model of the republic? And so, did either of you get to read Federalist number 10 in between the 2 days, or you didn't have time?
Like, I read it, but I'm not like 100% understanding. Do you know what I'm saying?
The language is kind of hard.
Yeah.
I read the summary, but
Okay. And so so you read the summary, and did that kind of help your understanding of the actual paper?
I mean, what I got from the summary was that he thought that the best way was like to be, what was it, like part republic and then still have some aspects of a democracy. He thought it was best to like put them together.
Yeah.
Or something like that. I read it like yesterday. I mean Monday.
Okay. I'm like, I want to talk about like Amber's answer and stuff, but I like don't want to like skip ahead and like you guys' understanding because I want to and so I need to find a better way to like break down like the Federalist Papers and stuff like that, because like I kind of wrote that first one down and everything. It's on the drive, but also I think SparkNotes might be a little bit better because it has like kind of main quotes and stuff like that it picks out. And I think that's really important as far as understanding the document. But you're on the right track, Joseph, with needing both. Because, yeah, let's look at Federalist 10. So, honestly, so you see how like there are, it's like caps locked right here? I would say, it's weird because like, I'm trying to figure out a way to like break it down because in my mind already starts breaking it down, if that makes sense. I'm gonna have to get back to you guys and try to make an edited version where I help break down this. Thankfully, I actually think that this is one of the last Federalist essays that you guys are gonna have to read. So that's good news. I saw Joseph, nice smile right there. You're like, yes. I mean, I hate like their writing because it's just so dull and it's repetitive. That's the most annoying part. Is it's just they say the same thing 5 different ways. It was like they're paying by the word. You know, actually, Charles Dickens was paid by the word, and that's one reason why his stuff is so long-winded. Because his stories were put into the newspapers, each of the chapters, so they weren't published as like a book, and so he was paid per word. So if you ever read Charles Dickens, it's thick for a reason.
Wow.
But so, I mean, the kind of the main takeaways that you want to get from here is that he saw that there was only 2 ways to control a faction: to remove its causes or to control its effects.
Mm-hmm.
But if you remove the causes of faction, then you're destroying liberty, because factions are developed through the interests of others. And so if you were to be like, okay, you can't create a group based on your commonality, that's a destruction of democracy. And because the purpose of democracy is that people get together and figure out what is the most beneficial for all of them. And if you don't allow people to gather and discuss, it's essentially violating the First Amendment and the right to gather. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only way to kind of control it is to control the effects of it. And so that's why we have the checks and balances so that put them factions in opposition of each other, aka the Republican and Democratic parties. Mm-hmm. And so that way they're competing against each other for the betterment of the people.
But
that way they don't. Yeah.
Isn't this like in an ideal form? Because a lot of times I feel like these 2 parties, like the Democrats and the Republicans, like their interests are, I want to say, like selfish in a way. That kind of leads to stalegate or stalemate? Where
yeah.
where nothing gets done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly, I would say that's like competition has gone too far, where it actually damages the people. And that's honestly the, because it's based upon laissez-faire capitalism, you know, the free market where people get better products because competitors are, well, producers are made to compete with each other to produce the best product to gain the most amount of support. The same thing is true of our system, our democratic system. It is based on competition. And competition has led to the tragedy of the commons, as we have seen both through corporations and through the political parties and their extreme polarization. So yeah, I think that Madison, I was up in the clouds thinking like, oh yeah, this will be great. Competition, yeah. And it's just gone too far. And where we're actually the ones who are damaged by it. Because they're destroying each other to win. So, yeah. Guess I'll get off my soapbox. And then, okay, we're 10 minutes over, but do you guys want to go over R2 and R3? Or do you want to head out?
I'm fine with either.
What was that?
I'm good with either, my bad.
Because I can keep going, but Andrea, if you want to go to bed, you can go to bed.
Oh no, that's fine. We can go over them.
Okay, cool. So this girl, she works at the bakery, and so she gets up at 2 a.m. So she has an early bedtime. Giving Joseph some context. Like, go to bed, Andrea.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just being silly right now. Wednesday plate energy is leaving. So in the direct democracy article, it kind of talked about the way that direct democracy has been seen in the world, right? And they kind of called it the Swiss model.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me what the Swiss model is?
So this is what my professor said. He said that the Swiss people copied California. So I don't know. But basically, doesn't it talk about how like now the people are turned into like legislators because they can propose bills and like referendums and stuff like that?
Yeah. So the Swiss model would be what our current model is with the initiative, referendums, and recalls, where citizens are able to propose a bill onto the ballot. And by doing that, like as you said, they're becoming legislatures because they're writing a bill that may be passed into law. And so that's why they say that. And so why did California choose to change why did the Swiss change theirs to California's, whichever the case may be?
Was it because of the railroad? They wanted to take more cow?
I think it actually happened a little after. Let me see. Actually, I think because it kind of says that it was. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was because of the railroad. For some reason, I was thinking it happened a little later. But they were appropriating the Swiss model then in 1903, I think is what it said, or 1911. so yeah, they switched because they saw that well, they saw that there was the best way to stop the railroads and their influence over the politicians by just creating a law from the citizens and completely going around their representatives who are being influenced by this corporation. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. And so we're by initiative, R3. So what was, we kind of discussed what this was about, but could one of you give us a tiny little summary?
So I'm just trying to remember. It's hard for me to just remember the
Oh, you're good.
by their names.
I may have wrong the red article.
Oh. It's this one, Economist, April 20.
Oh, yes, I read that one.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's basically how people were angry about the property taxes because they were like too high.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then at that time, Jerry Brown was the governor.
Yeah.
The first time around. Yeah. And then he was trying to get reelected. Mm-hmm. And then there was like this guy, I think he was the something about the county of like South Cal, somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think he came up with Proposition 13, right? Which was to cut property taxes. And then
what happened when the property taxes were cut?
Is it I wrote here the unintended consequence was that the centralization of virtually all finance became in Sacramento. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
So basically, because by taking away this property tax, it took away the tax that was going to the local governments, the county governments, and making them go directly to the state government. So Sacramento, because we're the capital and everything. And so thus it's centralized finance. And then it became the capital to be the one who distribute the tax money rather than the counties. And so that changed the motivations of the way that that money was used and how it could be used. And then what happened with so it says that proposition changed the political culture. How did it do that? We kind of talked about, and it's linked to petitions.
Is it because so I think the method they used for this proposition to go around was to gather signatures, correct? Mm-hmm.
Because you need a certain amount of signatures for something to be able to be on the ballot.
Yeah. And then there's so many signatures one can gather. Like there's actually people now who that's their job. Like they go around and get signatures from people. So it kind of made it made it into this thing where you had to have money in order to be able to like do something politically.
Yeah.
Like a business.
Yeah, more so. Mm-hmm. Like one of the examples my professor used was that, like, you know, if Silicon Valley people wanted to pass a bill in their favor, like they have the means, like the money to get the signatures around, as opposed to someone who's like maybe like a small faction that wants to like a real change or like a beneficial change, like they might not have that opportunity because they don't have the funds.
Yeah, because they don't have the funds to pay somebody to collect signatures.
Mhm.
I mean, that's like one of the number one like jobs that they advertise to college students. You know, join a grassroots campaign and stuff, aka collect signatures for the ACLU. And so, I mean, we experience that on our day-to-day lives on a college campus, and so, and it really kind of delegitimizes the meaning behind these petitions and everything, laws. Because, I mean, it's like, is it really people supporting this, or did they just sign it so they could get away?
Yeah, that's another issue that like I was brought up, the fact that like these people are now making it their career to get these signatures. So they're like becoming very tactful at getting people's signatures, even though they may not be for whatever there is that they're trying to pass.
Yeah, no, like there's like that Greenpeace guy, like I don't know, like there's like a guy that I always see every year, like does like the Greenpeace like signature and donation collections and everything. I don't like honestly, I don't understand why people come to get donations on a college campus. I'm like, that is one of the worst places to go. Like, we're all poor as fuck. Like, I'll sign something, but I don't have money. I barely have a penny to spare. Like, shit. Go to some suburban Safeway. Go to a Bath and Body Works. Hell. Don't ask me for money. I should be the one asking for donations. Donate to the cause of Vanessa. I'm poor and malnourished too. For $2 a day, you can save this poor starving college student. Just like put up like different like grayscale like pictures of like me huddled in a corner crying over a textbook or something. Help make America's future bright again. Oh god, I'm thinking of way too many like different like graphics and stuff like that. But this is going way too far. But I mean, there are those people that do have like Kickstarters for themselves and stuff for like shit that's like, oh, okay, it's very personal. All right. So after that, but that's essentially the 3 readings for direct democracy, and we went over the definitions last class. So, you guys have any? Do you all have any other questions that you'd like to address before I let you go?
I think we got it.
All right. I will see you both tomorrow. Have a good night, guys.
You too.